Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. So, you guys sent us some super interesting material. It's a document, and it's titled in Arabic, Hejianse. And, of course, we all know that means to become a leader. Mm-hmm. And, our mission here really is to kind of go beyond just the words on the page. I mean, we want to extract the real essence of the wisdom, the practical insights that we can actually apply to our lives, as leaders, and share those with you guys, our amazing listeners, in a way that's not just straight information, but something that really sparks new ways of thinking, about leadership. So think of this as your personal shortcut to understanding the foundational principles that this text lays out. And we know you're all busy people, you want to connect with new ideas efficiently. That's exactly what we're going for here.
Absolutely.
Get ready for some perspectives that might surprise you. And maybe even a few of those aha moments as we go through this together. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's always enriching to examine a concept, like leadership, through different cultural lenses, right? And this document, it definitely offers a unique viewpoint on this topic that really is universal.
Yeah.
And right from the beginning, it makes a pretty powerful statement. It argues that no matter how many leaders a society has, there's this constant need, this pressing need for more effective ones.
Right.
And it even suggests that this deficit of strong leadership, it can actually contribute to a pervasive sense that things are kind of adrift, especially with all the rapid transformations we've seen in recent times. Mm-hmm. And what it proposes is that, individuals, they need to develop their own ability to navigate this evolving landscape before they can effectively guide others through it.
Okay, so let's dig a little deeper into this idea of why leaders are so crucial. The text, it presents a really fundamental argument. It starts with a scenario that's easy for anyone to imagine.
Yeah.
Just a small group of two people stranded on a deserted island. They would still benefit from someone taking the lead.
Right.
To organize, to figure out survival and progress, right?
Absolutely.
And then as soon as you go to 3 or more people, that need for clear decision-making, it becomes so critical.
Yeah.
It's fascinating how this very basic human dynamic scales up to the complexities of modern organizations and everything. Yeah. The source really argues that in today's world, our well-being, our quality of life, it hinges on the presence of capable leaders. At all different levels. What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that's spot on. And the text lays out 3 really, really core reasons for this. So first of all, it emphasizes that leaders, they're the linchpin for the effectiveness of all kinds of institutions.
Yeah.
We're talking, from your local sports team to independent film productions, all the way to, big financial institutions, global car manufacturers, everything. Yeah. And what's interesting here is the scope of responsibility that's given to these leaders. It's not just about setting goals. It also includes motivating individuals,
right?
Making those critical hiring decisions, shaping the environment where people work, ensuring transparency, ethical principles are followed, and ultimately influencing the morale of everyone involved.
Right. It's a pretty big job, right?
Huge.
So the second reason that the text brings up is that leaders act as these essential anchors and guides. Mm-hmm. And this really resonates, especially the idea that, they provide a sense of stability, inspiration, and hope.
Yeah.
Especially in times when public trust in institutions is maybe a little shaky.
Absolutely.
It's like having that reliable point of reference when everything else feels uncertain,
Absolutely. Having that compass, that North Star.
Yeah.
And the third point, it underscores the damage that can be done when leadership is lacking. Mm-hmm. And the source looks back at those Wall Street scandals of the 1980s, names like Milken and Boesky.
Right.
And then it connects that to, the early 21st century.
Right.
And uses that to illustrate how self-interest and those manipulative practices by people in positions of power, how that can just erode trust.
Absolutely.
Cause lasting damage to reputations, to stakeholders, everyone involved.
Yeah.
And it's a really clear message that poor leadership isn't just, a matter of inefficiency.
Right.
It can have these huge negative consequences.
Right. So I think we've established the importance of leadership.
Absolutely.
But now let's talk about the foundational elements.
Right.
What makes a good leader according to this document?
Yeah.
It's really encouraging to see that, this source believes leadership isn't limited by, age or gender or social standing.
Right.
So what are these core ingredients that anyone can cultivate?
Well, the first one it highlights is vision. And it explains that, a leader has this well-defined sense of what they want you to achieve, both personally and professionally. Mm-hmm. And they have that fortitude to persevere in the face of challenges. The analogy it uses is you can't get there if you don't know where or why you want to go.
Right.
And that really, it emphasizes that kind of directional role.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Without that clear destination, it's all just wandering around.
Exactly.
The second core element is passion. Mm-hmm. The source, it defines a leader as someone who genuinely loves what they do.
Right.
And it beautifully connects this to Tolstoy's idea of hope. Hope is the dreams of the waking man.
I love that quote.
It's a beautiful quote.
Yeah.
And it suggests that a leader's own passion is this catalyst for hope and inspiration in others. It's this idea that enthusiasm can be contagious.
Absolutely.
Motivating. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think about all the leaders that I've felt drawn to, or felt inspired by, and they all had that spark, that passion.
And an energy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the third element the document talks about, it's this big one, this big concept of integrity. Mm-hmm. And the text thoughtfully breaks it down into three different aspects.
Right.
So the first is self-knowledge.
Right.
And it references, that ancient wisdom from the temple in Delhi, know thyself. Mm-hmm. And it really underscores the importance of understanding your own strengths, your weaknesses, your motivations.
Yeah.
A leader, according to this, is fundamentally honest with themselves, acknowledges their imperfections. I love the metaphor that the document uses here. It says that the leader is their own raw material.
Oh, that's good.
Right.
Yeah.
It's implying that self-awareness is that essential first step in any kind of leadership development. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think understanding your own composition.
Right.
Before you can shape anything else, you have to know yourself.
Yeah.
It's crucial.
Okay. So then the second part of integrity that the text talks about is honesty and loyalty.
Right.
And it emphasizes that leadership is built on this foundation of truthfulness, unwavering allegiance, resilience in the face of adversity, and of course that intrinsic sense of integrity. And it makes this point that integrity isn't something you can just get on your own. You have to earn it through your actions, being trustworthy. And it says without the genuine trust of their team, a leader can't really function. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, if you don't have that trust, if people don't believe in you, you're totally undermined.
Not going anywhere.
Yeah.
And then the third part of integrity is this concept of maturity.
Right.
The source, it explains that leadership at its core is about guiding people, right? Mm-hmm. And that requires experience.
Yeah.
And it uses this interesting phrase, a non-slave mentality, which I think means, independence of thought and action. Resistance to just being, dictated to by external pressures or norms.
Yeah.
A mature leader, they possess this mindset and they foster it in the people that they lead.
Yeah. It's like, encouraging that autonomy and critical thinking.
Right. So we've got vision, passion, integrity. Are there any other essential qualities that the text brings up?
Yeah, so the final two really crucial ingredients are curiosity and challenge.
Okay.
And the text really argues that leaders, they have this inherent inquisitiveness about the world around them. They want to learn, they want to grow. They're not afraid to take risks. They're not afraid to try new things.
Right.
And crucially, they see setbacks not as defeats, but as opportunities to learn.
Yeah.
They recognize that process of trial and error, it's part of growth and innovation.
Yeah. This whole idea of self-knowledge and maturity within the concept of integrity. It made me think of Erikson's stages of psychosocial development.
Right.
And the text does touch on this briefly. Can you tell us a little more about how that framework connects to these leadership qualities?
Yeah, sure. So the text, it introduces Erikson's 8 stages as a way to understand how individuals develop, their sense of self how they navigate social interactions throughout their lives. And the key idea here is that successfully resolving the conflict at each stage is crucial for healthy psychological development. And what the text points out is that if these internal conflicts, they remain unresolved, then they can manifest as challenges and limitations in adulthood. So for instance, like an unresolved conflict between initiative and guilt in childhood, that might hinder an adult's ability to take decisive action, to lead with confidence.
And the text gives this really good example. It talks about, a woman who's maybe grappling with the demands of motherhood and her career. And it illustrates how that can create internal conflict and potential feelings of guilt,
Absolutely.
It also talks about how societal norms can pressure individuals, particularly men, to pursue certain career paths based on what's expected rather than what they truly desire. It uses this image of an accountant who really wants to be a poet, but it's not what's expected.
Not the traditional path.
And I love the anecdote that it shares about John Lennon's aunt.
Oh, yeah.
Discouraging him from music as a career, because it's not, quote, a stable way to make a living. And it shows the danger of, dismissing or abandoning your true passions due to those external pressures or lack of self-belief.
Which goes back to that self-knowledge, that courage to pursue your vision.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's switch gears a little bit here.
Okay.
The text also emphasizes the role of experiences that broaden your horizons. And specifically, it points to travel as a very powerful form of learning.
It's a great way to challenge our assumptions. It can stimulate new perspectives. And the text points out that even, really ordinary aspects of life, like work habits, religious practices, meal rituals, how people rest, all those things, they can be dramatically different across cultures. And the examples it uses are, Paris in August. Sometimes things are a little slower in Paris in August. And then the Spanish tradition of the siesta. Those are really vivid examples.
But the text is also careful to say that, the true value of travel isn't just in observing, It's about really immersing yourself, engaging, and maintaining an awareness of those differences. Even as we're seeking to understand them.
It's deeper than just being a tourist.
It's interesting how it connects this back to traditional leaders, who often cultivated diverse interests like poetry and cooking. And they dedicated time to personal reflection.
Absolutely.
So it's suggesting that, someone who's well-rounded with different experiences and the ability to reflect, is often better equipped to lead.
They've got that breadth and depth that allows them to see things differently.
And that kind of leads us to the section on thinking and finding solutions. The text really stresses that reflection allows leaders to learn those valuable lessons from their experiences, both the good and the not so good.
Absolutely.
And it outlines several different methods of thinking. Like consciously analyzing past events, keeping a journal, engaging in discussions, allowing yourself to dream, critical thinking, actively listening.
It's giving us a toolkit, for how to engage with our minds.
And I found Freud's concept, bringing the unconscious to the conscious through analysis. Super relevant here.
Absolutely.
In the context of self-awareness. And then the point it makes about, anniversaries potentially triggering buried emotions adds another layer to the importance of those reflective practices.
It's reminding us to be mindful. To process those experiences.
To uncover those deeper meanings and develop solutions, grounded in that understanding.
Absolutely.
And the text goes on to introduce Niels Bohr's distinction between, quote, small truths, which have clear opposites, and then great truths, which often have these contradictory opposites. And this is a really, really useful concept for leaders, because a lot of the challenges they face, they don't have these simple right or wrong answers.
It's about navigating those tensions between these seemingly opposing ideas.
And the example it gives is, hope and despair. They aren't mutually exclusive, in human experience. Wisdom, the text suggests, comes from understanding and navigating that space, between those apparent contradictions, trust and doubt,
right,
optimism and realism.
Yeah.
So reflecting on our experiences, it helps us develop that nuanced perspective and find those creative solutions to the conflicts that we face.
Right, and both the internal and the external.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that leads us nicely into this discussion of strategic thinking.
Okay.
The text starts this section off with this really memorable saying. It says, "The scenery only changes if you are the dog going forward."
I love that.
Right. What do you think that means for leadership?
Well, it's really conveying this idea that effective leaders, they have to be proactive, they have to look ahead.
Yeah.
Because the environment they operate in is constantly changing.
Right.
And then it goes on to share Sidney Pollack's, really insightful response to that question of whether leadership can be taught.
Right.
And he emphasized that it's not a fixed set of rules.
Right.
It's more like an art form that needs to be, creatively reapplied to each new situation.
And then it quotes Robert Dodson, who says that, quote, "Leaders are not technicians."
Mm-hmm.
So it's really emphasizing that leadership requires adaptability and creative problem solving.
Yeah. It's not about just following a formula.
Right. But even though strategic thinking is, inherently complex,
right,
the text does outline some key steps involved. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So those steps, they include the ability to analyze, those complex situations by breaking them down into their fundamental components, identifying patterns, forming generalizations, clearly defining what outcome you want, identifying the strategies, and importantly, anticipating the rewards and the pitfalls, right? Yeah. Consistently monitoring your progress, objectively evaluating any weaknesses,
right,
and then being willing to take those calculated risks to achieve those strategic goals.
And it makes this reference to Carlos Castaneda's, distinction between the average person and the warrior.
Right.
Where the warrior, they see things as challenges rather than good or bad omens.
Right. They accept those setbacks.
Right. So all of these elements that we've been talking about, they kind of seem to come together in this concept of steps to leadership, ways of expressing oneself.
Yeah.
And the text gives us this sequence of 9 steps that ultimately lead to leadership.
Yeah. It's a fascinating progression.
Can you walk us through those?
Sure. So it starts with thinking leads to a solution.
Okay.
And then that solution fosters a broader perspective.
Right.
That perspective solidifies into a personal viewpoint, which allows for measurement and assessment.
Right.
Those measurements, then, they fuel the desire to achieve more.
Okay.
And then that desire leads to mastery of the skills and knowledge that you need.
Right.
And then mastery forms the basis for strategic thinking.
Okay.
Which then enables the full expression of yourself.
Right.
And then that final step is that this full synthesis of self-expression is equal to true leadership.
Wow, it's a really powerful model.
It is.
It really emphasizes, inner development and self-realization. Okay, so now the text moves on to a discussion of, quote, "a new generation of leaders."
Right.
So what makes this emerging group of leaders stand out, according to the text?
Well, the text emphasizes that genuine leadership, it has to exist internally before it can be translated into action.
Right.
And the actions of an authentic leader, they're a reflection of their values and beliefs.
Yeah.
And then it goes on to outline these key traits that are often found in this new generation of leaders.
Yeah.
So we're talking comprehensive training, a commitment to lifelong learning, insatiable curiosity, boundless enthusiasm, a belief in people, collective understanding, willingness to take risks, empathy, authenticity, integrity, a clear vision, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances.
It's a big list, but
it is.
It's a good list.
Yeah, it's a good list.
And the source expresses this optimism that the self-expression of these leaders, it's gonna drive innovation across various fields, shape a new and hopefully better world.
Right.
And it concludes by saying that expressing yourself truly is easier and more rewarding than suppressing it.
Absolutely.
So we finally come to the final summary.
Yes.
Where it kind of brings together all these key insights that we've explored.
Right. And it highlights, how vital that connection is between leaders and followers.
Yeah.
And it emphasizes the role of followers in providing honest feedback, in speaking truth to power.
Absolutely.
And it makes this really important point that honesty, even though it can be tough, it's more valuable than silence. It requires courage from everyone, not just those in subordinate positions.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that journey to becoming an effective leader, it's rarely linear. There are detours, there are setbacks.
Right.
And along the way, you pick up these tools and knowledge and experience.
Right.
And ultimately that whole process, it helps you find your own voice.
Yeah.
And learn how to engage others through your leadership skills.
So to recap, our deep dive into the principles of to become a leader. The foundational elements that we unpacked are vision, that essential sense of direction,
right?
Passion, that powerful internal drive.
Integrity, encompassing self-awareness, honesty, and maturity.
Right.
Curiosity, a proactive approach to challenges. Strategic thinking, that ability to navigate that dynamic environment.
Absolutely.
And ultimately that authentic expression of yourself.
Right. And these aren't just these abstract ideas.
Right.
These are practical tools for effective leadership.
And for you, our listener, we hope that this deep dive has given you a concise but thorough understanding of these principles.
Yeah.
So think about this. As you consider these elements, vision, passion, integrity, curiosity, strategic thinking, and self-expression,
right,
which of these resonates most strongly with your own understanding of leadership or your aspirations for leadership?
Or maybe how you see these elements playing out
right
in the leaders you encounter.
Yeah.
Both the good and the bad.
Absolutely. Which one feels most critical to you at this point in your journey?
Something to think about.
Definitely.
We encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, and how they apply to your own experiences, your aspirations.
Absolutely.
This has been a really, really enriching deep dive, and we look forward to exploring some related topics with you guys in the future.
Yes.
Thanks for being with us.